The expulsion proceedings had taken exactly 14 standard hours, 12 minutes, and 37 seconds. Admiral Sarah Chen kept precise time because precision mattered when history was being written in real time. She sat in the observer's gallery of the Galactic Council chambers, her weathered hands folded calmly in her lap as 347 alien species voted to cast humanity into the cosmic wilderness. The charges were predictable. Humanity was too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to bend rules that other species considered sacred. They refused to conform to established protocols for expansion, insisted on maintaining their own military forces despite Council regulations, and worst of all, they had repeatedly interfered in conflicts the Council had deemed resolved through proper channels. Council Speaker Velnoth, a towering crystalline being whose species had mastered politics before humans discovered fire, read the final tally with what passed for satisfaction among his kind. The vote is unanimous. Humanity's membership in the Galactic Council is hereby revoked. All trade agreements, military cooperation pacts, and diplomatic immunity provisions are terminated effective immediately. You have 72 standard hours to evacuate all human personnel from Council space. Ambassador Maria Santos, humanity's chief representative, stood with the kind of dignity that came from expecting this outcome for months. At 63, she had spent half her life navigating the labyrinthine politics of interspecies diplomacy. She knew when a game was rigged beyond salvation. "We understand," she said simply. Her voice carried clearly through the vast chamber's translation matrix, reaching every species in their own language. Humanity withdraws from Council space without protest. The silence that followed was deafening. Several Council members exchanged glances that spoke volumes. They had prepared for anger, for desperate bargaining, for the kind of dramatic speech that lesser species typically delivered when facing such judgment. What they got instead was acceptance so complete it bordered on indifference. Ambassador Zethkara of the Veltar Consortium felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She had been studying humans for decades, first as a xenobiologist and later as a political analyst. In all her research, she had never encountered a species that accepted defeat with such absolute calm. Other races raged against the dying of the light. Humans simply turned off the switch and walked away. Ambassador Santos gathered her materials with methodical precision. Her aide, a young man named David Park, followed her lead without question. They moved through the chamber like ghosts, acknowledging no one and nothing as they made their way to the exit. "Wait!" called out Councillor Thexwan, a nervous insectoid whose species had historically benefited from human protection against pirate raids. "Surely there must be some arrangement we can reach, perhaps a probationary period, or restricted membership with oversight." Santos paused at the chamber doors. For a moment, hope flickered across several faces in the assembly. Then the human ambassador turned, offering a smile that never reached her eyes. "Councillor Thexwan," she said, with perfect diplomatic courtesy, "humanity appreciates your concern. However, we believe it would be best for all parties if we simply pursue our own path. We wish the Council success in all its future endeavors." The doors sealed behind them with a soft whisper of displaced air. In the days that followed, the evacuation proceeded with military efficiency that impressed even humanity's critics. Human embassies across Council space were stripped clean and abandoned within 48 hours. Trade stations, research facilities, and diplomatic outposts were emptied and sealed. Not a single piece of human technology or intelligence was left behind. Admiral Chen coordinated the withdrawal from her flagship, the UES Defiant, a massive dreadnought that had once protected Council shipping lanes from the Krexti raiders. She watched the tactical displays with the same calm attention she brought to everything else, noting how smoothly each phase of the operation proceeded. Her XO, Commander Li Jiang, approached with the latest reports. "All personnel evacuated from the core systems, Admiral. The science teams from Kepler Station just reported successful departure. We're ahead of schedule by 18 hours. "Good." Chen studied the holographic displays showing human assets throughout the galaxy. Green indicators marked successful evacuations, while red dots showed the handful of locations still in progress. "What about the deep space installations?" Jiang's expression grew carefully neutral. "Officially, Admiral, we don't have any deep space installations outside Council monitoring. And unofficially, Project Lighthouse reports all stations are operational and fully staffed. They're excited to finally drop the pretense of compliance with Council survey regulations." Chen nodded. Project Lighthouse had been humanity's worst-kept secret for nearly 30 years. While officially adhering to Council restrictions on exploration beyond designated zones, human scouts had quietly mapped and established bases in hundreds of systems throughout the galaxy. The installations were small, carefully hidden, and completely illegal by Council standards. Now they were humanity's lifeline. The Council had expected expulsion to cripple human expansion, forcing them to retreat to their home system and a handful of already established colonies. What they failed to understand was that humans had been planning for this eventuality since first joining the galactic community. Every treaty signed, every regulation accepted, every diplomatic smile had been accompanied by quiet preparation for the day when cooperation would no longer be an option. On Earth, President Elena Vasquez addressed the global population with characteristic directness. She stood in the Oval Office, the weight of 13 billion people's future resting on her shoulders, and delivered the news with the same tone she might use to announce changes in agricultural policy. "My fellow humans," she began, her words transmitted to every corner of human space. "Today marks the end of one chapter in our species' history, and the beginning of another. We have been expelled from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. This decision was not unexpected, and we are prepared." She paused, allowing the magnitude of the moment to settle. In living rooms, military bases, research stations, and colonial settlements throughout human space, people stopped what they were doing to listen. Children pressed closer to their parents. Soldiers checked their equipment. Scientists looked up from their work. For decades, we have walked a careful line between cooperation and compromise. We have accepted restrictions on our expansion, limitations on our research, and oversight of our military development. We have done this in the hope that peaceful coexistence was possible. Today, we learn that hope was misplaced. The president's expression hardened slightly. But humanity has never been a species that yields to circumstance. We adapt. We overcome. We find a way forward no matter what obstacles are placed before us. The galaxy has chosen to exclude us from their community of civilized worlds. We will respect that choice and build our own. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with the kind of determination that had carried humanity from caves to the stars. Operation Genesis begins immediately. All deep space assets are authorized for full deployment. Research restrictions are lifted. Military development protocols are suspended. We are no longer bound by Council regulations, Council oversight, or Council limitations. The implications hit like a thunderclap. For 30 years, humanity had chafed under restrictions that limited their expansion to one new system per decade, capped their military vessels at specific tonnage limits, and required all research to be approved by Council oversight committees. Those restrictions had been lifted with a single sentence. In research laboratories across human space, scientists began pulling covers off equipment that had been gathering dust for decades. Military shipyards activated construction bays that had sat empty since the last expansion cycle. Colonial planning committees started reviewing proposals that had been filed away as pending Council approval. Admiral Chen felt the shift like a physical sensation as she stood on the Defiance Bridge, watching the last human vessels clear Council space. Her communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, looked up from her station with barely contained excitement. "Admiral, we're receiving activation codes from Fleet Command. All deep space assets, all reserve fleets, all classified research projects, everything's coming online." The Admiral studied her displays as dozens of new contacts appeared throughout the galaxy. Ships that had been running silent for years suddenly announced their presence. Bases that existed only in classified files began transmitting operational status reports. Research stations that officially didn't exist started uploading decades of accumulated data to the human military network. "How many assets are we talking about, Lieutenant?" Kim consulted her display, her expression growing increasingly amazed as new contacts continued appearing. "Current count is..." "Admiral, this can't be right. I'm showing over 2,000 vessels of various classes, 43 research installations, 70 to DT-FA defensive platforms, and..." "Jesus Christ, 12 fully operational shipyards and systems I've never heard of." Chen smiled for the first time in days. "Lieutenant, what you're seeing is what happens when humans spend 30 years preparing for the worst-case scenario. We've been building a shadow empire while pretending to be model citizens of the galactic community." The truth was staggering in its scope. While publicly adhering to Council limitations, humanity had been conducting the largest secret expansion in galactic history. Hidden shipyards had been constructing vessels using designs that violated a dozen different treaties. Research stations had been developing technologies that the Council had banned as too dangerous for civilized species. Military bases had been stockpiling equipment and personnel for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Now, with diplomatic ties severed and restrictions lifted, the galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they stopped asking for permission. The first sign came 3 days after the evacuation deadline. A Krexti raiding fleet, emboldened by the absence of human patrol vessels, attacked a mining station in the Outer Rim. It should have been an easy target, defended only by local security forces with light weapons and minimal training. Instead, they encountered something that shouldn't have existed. The UES Prometheus appeared out of hyperspace like a nightmare given form. The ship was 3 kilometers long, bristled with weapon systems that weren't in any Council database, and moved with the kind of predatory grace that sent seasoned raiders fleeing for their lives. It destroyed the entire Krexti fleet in 17 minutes, without taking a single hit. The survivors who managed to escape carried stories that spread like wildfire through the galactic underworld. Humans had ships that made Council dreadnoughts look like children's toys. They had weapons that could punch through shielding like it was made of paper. Most terrifying of all, they had appeared in a system that was supposed to be empty, suggesting they had been watching and waiting all along. Ambassador Zefkara received the reports in her office on the Council station orbiting Veltar Prime. She studied the tactical data with growing horror, cross-referencing it with intelligence files that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The Prometheus wasn't an anomaly. It was part of a fleet that numbered in the hundreds, possibly thousands. Ships that had been built in shipyards that didn't officially exist, using resources that had never appeared on any Council survey. She activated her secure communicator and placed a call to Admiral Chen, one of the few human contacts who still accepted messages from Council space. The Admiral's face appeared on her screen with professional courtesy, but Zefkara could see the steel beneath the surface. "Admiral Chen," she began carefully, "I've been reviewing recent reports from the Outer Rim. It appears human vessels are engaging in military operations outside your designated space." Chen's expression didn't change. "Ambassador Zefkara, I appreciate your concern, but humanity is no longer subject to Council designation of our operational space. We're operating within our own territory, protecting our own interests." "Your own territory?" Zefkara felt her blood chill. "Admiral, what exactly do you mean by that?" The human admiral leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Ambassador, we've been mapping and claiming systems for 30 years, quietly, legally, and completely within our rights as a sovereign species. The Council may have expelled us from your organization, but they can't expel us from space itself." The implications hit Zefkara like a physical blow. If humans had been claiming systems for 3 decades, and if they had been building infrastructure in those systems without Council oversight, then humanity's true space was dozens of times larger than anyone had imagined. "How many systems are we talking about, Admiral?" Chen's smile widened. "Enough, Ambassador. More than enough." The transmission ended, leaving Zefkara staring at a blank screen and contemplating the magnitude of the galaxy's mistake. They had expelled humanity believing they were casting out a troublesome upstart with limited resources and a handful of colonies. Instead, they had freed a shadow empire that had been growing in the darkness for decades, waiting for the moment when they could finally reveal themselves to the galaxy. 6 weeks after the expulsion, the galaxy received its first real glimpse of what humanity had been building in the shadows. The revelation came not through military action or diplomatic announcement, but through something far more mundane and infinitely more terrifying: a trade shipment. Captain Yves Moreau guided his freighter, the Marie Curie, through the asteroid field surrounding the hidden depot in the Kappa Centauri system. The massive installation had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for over 20 years, serving as both manufacturing hub and strategic reserve. Now, with restrictions lifted and pretense abandoned, it hummed with activity that would have been impossible to hide under Council oversight. The depot itself defied everything the galaxy thought they knew about human engineering capabilities. Constructed within a hollowed-out asteroid cluster, it stretched across 40 cubic kilometers of space and housed manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and storage bays filled with equipment that officially didn't exist. More importantly, it was one of 17 such installations scattered throughout human space. Moreau docked with practiced ease, noting the controlled chaos of vessels loading and unloading cargo that ranged from standard trade goods to military hardware that would give Council analysts nightmares. His cargo hold contained medical supplies, agricultural equipment, and mining machinery destined for the Veltar Consortium worlds that had been hit hardest by the recent surge in pirate activity. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 weeks ago, the Veltar had voted to expel humanity from civilized space. Now they were desperately trying to buy the protection that human patrol fleets had provided for free. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the depot's chief administrator, met him in the cargo bay with a manifest that made interesting reading. Captain Moreau, I trust the journey was uneventful, smooth as silk, Doc, though I did notice increased scanner sweeps near the council border. They're definitely trying to figure out where we're going. Warren smiled grimly. She was a small woman in her 50s who had spent her career managing logistics for operations that officially didn't exist. Her organizational skills had turned the Kappa Centauri depot from a hidden supply cache into humanity's most productive manufacturing center outside Earth itself. Let them scan, she said, checking items off her list as dock workers began transferring cargo. The beauty of operating in our own space is that we don't need to hide anymore. If council ships want to follow our trade routes, they're welcome to try. They might learn something interesting about the size of human territory. That was the galaxy's first shock. When human traders began operating openly in the aftermath of the expulsion, their routes revealed a network of settled systems that dwarfed anything in council records. Systems that appeared on no official charts suddenly showed thriving human colonies, mining operations, and industrial facilities. Worlds that council scouts had surveyed as uninhabitable or strategically worthless turned out to host major population centers and strategic installations. The scale of the deception was breathtaking. For 30 years, humanity had been conducting the largest covert expansion in galactic history, establishing footholds in hundreds of systems while maintaining the fiction of compliance with council restrictions. They had claimed worlds and sectors the council considered empty, built cities on planets dismissed as worthless, and created an interstellar civilization that operated entirely outside official oversight. President Elena Vasquez stood in the Situation Room beneath the Capitol building, studying holographic displays that showed the true extent of human space for the first time. The revelation was stunning even to her, and she had authorized most of the expansion herself. Seeing it all laid out in a single comprehensive map drove home the magnitude of what they had accomplished. Final count, Madam President, reported General Marcus Thompson, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. 437 settled systems, 215 mining operations, 43 major industrial centers, and a total population of approximately 47 billion humans living outside officially recognized territory. Vasquez studied the numbers with the detached fascination of someone watching history unfold. General, when we started the Shadow Expansion program 30 years ago, our most optimistic projections called for maybe 50 systems and 5 billion people. How did we end up with numbers like these? The general consulted his tablets, pulling up historical data that told the story of humanity's greatest gamble. Several factors, Madam President. First, our scout services proved exceptionally good at finding habitable worlds in systems the Council had written off. Second, our terraforming technology advanced faster than anyone expected. Third, and most importantly, humans proved willing to settle in conditions that other species would consider unacceptable. That last point was crucial. While other species required specific atmospheric compositions, temperature ranges, and gravitational conditions, humans had proven remarkably adaptable. They had settled worlds with thin atmospheres, high radiation levels, and extreme weather patterns. They had built thriving colonies in asteroid belts, on moons with no atmosphere, and in systems where the local star's output would have fried most other species. The Council had dismissed these worlds as worthless, precisely because they were unsuitable for the species that made up the galactic community. They never considered that humans might not only survive in such conditions, but actually thrive there. The second shock came when human researchers began publishing their findings from 3 decades of unrestricted scientific development. The papers appeared simultaneously across academic networks throughout the galaxy, uploaded from sources that couldn't be traced or blocked. Within hours, universities, research institutions, and government laboratories were grappling with revelations that fundamentally challenged their understanding of physics, biology, and engineering. Dr. Sarah Kim, formerly of the Seoul Institute of Technology and currently director of the Prometheus Research Station, watched the chaos unfold from her office overlooking the station's main laboratory complex. The facility had been built inside a rogue planet drifting between star systems, hidden from council sensors and free to pursue research that violated dozens of interspecies treaties. Her colleague, Dr. Rajesh Patel, burst into her office with a tablet displaying reaction feeds from across the galaxy. Sarah, you need to see this. The Crystalline Assembly just called an emergency session to discuss our papers on quantum manipulation. The Zephyrian Republic is demanding to know how we developed functional faster-than-light communication. And the Andromedan Collective is accusing us of fabricating our research on consciousness transfer. Kim leaned back in her chair, savoring the moment. Rajesh, what you're seeing is 30 years of unrestricted research finally seeing daylight. We've been developing technologies that the Council banned as too dangerous or theoretically impossible since before most of these species achieved spaceflight. The research stations scattered throughout human space had been pursuing investigations that would have horrified Council oversight committees. Artificial intelligence that exceeded legal parameters, genetic engineering that violated biological ethics standards, weapons research that broke every treaty on military technology, materials science that produced substances the Council had classified as existentially threatening. Now, with diplomatic ties severed and oversight eliminated, humanity was revealing 3 decades of accumulated knowledge that made their official technological level seem primitive by comparison. The third shock was military, and it came when the hegemony of suns decided to test humanity's resolve. Grand Admiral Cathmore commanded the largest military force outside the core worlds, a fleet of over 300 vessels that had never suffered a defeat in 2 centuries of expansion. The hegemony had been eyeing human territory since the expulsion, viewing the isolated systems as easy targets for expansion. Intelligence reports suggested that humanity's military had been crippled by Council restrictions and would be unable to mount effective resistance. Cathmore chose the Tau Epsilon system for his first strike. According to Council records, it was a minor human outpost with perhaps 50,000 settlers and minimal defenses. His fleet jumped into the system expecting to find a few patrol boats and some hastily erected defensive platforms. Instead, they found the UES Leviathan waiting for them. The ship was impossible by every standard Cathmore understood. At 8 kilometers long, it was larger than anything in the hegemony fleet. It moved with impossible grace for something of its size, and it was armed with weapons that shouldn't have been able to fit on a mobile platform. Most disturbing of all, it was clearly human in design, bearing the distinctive angular lines and aggressive styling that characterized their military architecture. Unknown vessel. Cathmore transmitted on standard frequencies. You are in violation of hegemony territorial claims. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. The response came from a human officer whose voice carried the kind of calm confidence that preceded massacre. Grand Admiral Cathmore, this is Admiral Rebecca Torres of the United Earth Navy. You are currently in human territorial space without authorization. You have 10 minutes to withdraw your forces before we consider your presence an act of war. Cathmore felt a chill run down his spine. The human knew his name, his rank, and apparently his intentions. More troubling, they were claiming territorial sovereignty over a system that had been designated as open space by Council cartographers. Human, your species has no legitimate claim to this territory. Council records show, Admiral, Torres interrupted, her voice taking on an edge that promised violence. Humanity is no longer bound by Council records, Council recognition, or Council authority.
This system was claimed and settled by human colonists, 20 together in the end.
Your presence here constitutes an invasion of sovereign human space. The tactical displays showed the truth of her words. What Cathmore had taken for asteroid mining operations were actually heavily fortified defensive platforms. The settlement was a full-scale colony with a population approaching 2 million. Most ominous of all, energy readings suggested the Leviathan wasn't alone. Something was moving in the outer system. Multiple contacts that were slowly revealing themselves as additional human warships. Cathmore found himself in the position that had faced every military commander throughout history, confronting an enemy whose capabilities far exceeded intelligence estimates. His fleet of 300 vessels suddenly seemed inadequate against a single human ship that massed more than his flagship and 5 escorts combined. You have 5 minutes. Torres added helpfully. I should mention that our territorial waters extend to approximately 4 light hours from the primary star. You're currently well within our defensive perimeter. The Grand Admiral chose discretion over valor and ordered his fleet to withdraw. The retreat was conducted with as much dignity as possible, but there was no hiding the fact that the most powerful military force in the sector had fled from a single human vessel. More importantly, the engagement revealed that humanity's military capabilities were as far beyond Council estimates as their territorial holdings. The Leviathan represented technology that violated fundamental assumptions about what was possible in mobile military platforms. Its weapons operated on principles that weren't in any Council database. Its defensive systems seemed to ignore energy weapons that should have been capable of destroying any known vessel. The intelligence reports that reached the Council painted a picture that sent cold fear through the galaxy's power centers. Humanity hadn't just been expanding their territory during their 3 decades of membership. They had been developing military technology that made them potentially superior to any force the galaxy could field against them. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, now revealed to be merely one vessel in humanity's true fleet, watching tactical displays that showed human forces throughout the galaxy revealing themselves for the first time. Hidden bases activated their defenses. Concealed shipyards began operating at full capacity. Research stations dropped their masking fields and began transmitting their actual capabilities. "Status report, Commander Zhang," she requested. Her executive officer consulted multiple displays showing the scope of Operation Genesis, humanity's emergence from 3 decades of hiding. "All deep space assets are now operational and identified, Admiral. Fleet strength is currently assessed at 2,300 combat vessels, ranging from patrol boats to super dreadnoughts. We have defensive installations in over 400 systems, manufacturing capacity exceeding core world production, and research capabilities that..." Zhang paused, consulting his data again. "Admiral, our research capabilities appear to exceed the combined output of the entire Council by a factor of approximately 3 to 1. Chen nodded with satisfaction. "And our colonial assets? 47 billion citizens in 437 systems, with another 12 systems currently under development. Agricultural output is sufficient to feed approximately 60 billion people. Industrial capacity is..." Zhang shook his head in amazement. "We could outfit and supply a fleet twice our current size without straining our production capabilities." The Admiral studied the displays, showing humanity's true presence throughout the galaxy. They had done more than simply hide their expansion. They had created an entire parallel civilization that operated outside galactic awareness, building the infrastructure and capabilities needed to stand alone against the entire galaxy if necessary. "Commander, transmit the new territorial maps to all human installations. I want everyone to understand the scope of what we've accomplished." The maps, when they were distributed, told the story of humanity's greatest achievement. In 30 years working within the constraints of Council oversight and diplomatic pressure, they had managed to establish a presence throughout the galaxy that rivaled the entire Council itself. More importantly, they had done it without any other species realizing the true scale of their expansion. The galaxy was about to learn that expelling humanity from their Council hadn't removed a troublesome member. It had freed a hidden empire that had been growing in the shadows, waiting for the moment when it could finally reveal itself to the universe. And that moment had arrived. 3 months after the expulsion, the galaxy's first glimpse of humanity's true nature came through an event that would be remembered as the Arcturus incident. It began when the Kryllian Empire, emboldened by humanity's apparent isolation and the Council's assurances of non-interference, decided to test their new neighbor's resolve. The Kryllians had been expanding aggressively for decades, viewing the galaxy as their rightful domain and other species as obstacles to be overcome. Their latest target was the Arcturus Nebula, a region rich in rare minerals that had been contested territory between multiple powers for generations. Recent surveys suggested massive deposits of quantum crystals essential for advanced technology, making the region too valuable to ignore. What the Kryllians didn't know was that humanity had established a significant presence in the nebula 20 years earlier, hidden within the dense gas clouds that interfered with most scanning technology. The installation, known as Deep Station Omega, served as both a mining operation and a forward military base, part of the network of hidden facilities that formed humanity's secret empire. Admiral Vexthal commanded the Kryllian Expeditionary Force, a massive fleet of 800 vessels, ranging from survey ships to heavy battle cruisers. The Armada represented the largest military deployment in Kryllian history, intended to claim and fortify the entire nebula in a single overwhelming operation. Intelligence reports suggested minimal resistance from the scattered mining operations and research stations that various species had established in the region. The fleet entered the nebula's outer edge with confidence born of overwhelming superiority. 800 ships against perhaps a dozen civilian installations should have been a foregone conclusion. The Kryllians had fought and defeated the combined fleets of entire sectors. A few isolated mining stations posed no threat to their expansion. That confidence lasted exactly 17 minutes. The first sign of trouble came when long-range sensors began detecting anomalous readings throughout the nebula. What appeared to be natural gas formations were moving in patterns that suggested artificial control. Energy signatures that should have indicated asteroid mining operations showed power outputs consistent with military installations. Most disturbing, there were simply too many contacts for a region that was supposed to be sparsely settled. Admiral Vextul studied the tactical displays with growing unease. Communications broadcast on all frequencies. All vessels in this region are ordered to identify themselves immediately or face seizure under Krillian territorial authority. The response came not from the civilian stations he expected, but from a source that made his blood run cold. The transmission originated from the nebula's heart, where sensors showed no significant mass concentrations. The voice was unmistakably human, carrying the kind of calm authority that preceded violence. Krillian vessels, this is Admiral Jackson Cross of the United Earth Deep Space Fleet. You are currently in violation of human territorial space. You have 1 hour to withdraw all forces beyond the nebula's outer boundary. Vextul felt the bridge grow silent around him. Human territorial space? According to every chart and survey, the nebula was unclaimed territory open to colonization by any species with the resources to develop it. There should have been no human military presence, certainly nothing capable of threatening a force the size of his fleet. Unknown human vessel, your claim lacks legal standing. This region has been designated as open space by Galactic Convention. We are conducting legitimate survey operations under established interspecies law. Cross's response carried a note of amusement that made the Krillian admiral's scales itch with unease. Admiral Vextul, humanity is no longer bound by Galactic Convention or Council authority. We established territorial claims in this region 18 years ago, ratified by human colonial authority and recognized by human law. Your presence here constitutes an invasion of sovereign space. The tactical officer, a young Krillian named Sector, looked up from his console with confusion. Sir, how does he know your name? And I'm showing increasing energy readings throughout the nebula. Whatever's out there, it's much larger than initial scans indicated. Vextul studied his displays with the growing realization that he had walked into something far beyond his expectations. The nebula, which should have contained a handful of civilian installations, was revealing the signatures of what appeared to be a major military installation. Power readings suggested industrial facilities capable of supporting hundreds of thousands of people. Defensive platforms were emerging from the gas clouds like predators revealing themselves to prey. Sir, the sensor operator reported with barely controlled panic. I'm detecting multiple large contacts moving through the nebula. Configuration suggests military vessels. Displacement indicating features. Admiral, some of these contacts are larger than our entire battle group. That was when humanity revealed what they had really been building in the shadows. Deep Station Omega wasn't just a mining operation. It was a fortress carved out of a cluster of asteroids, connected by tunnels and defensive platforms that turned the entire installation into a single massive weapons system. The station housed a population of 300,000 people, supported a fleet of over 200 vessels, and contained manufacturing facilities capable of producing everything from fightercraft to battleships. More importantly, it was one of 43 such installations scattered throughout human space. The ships emerging from the nebula's depths defied every assumption about human military capabilities. The lead vessel, identified as the UES Thunderchild, massed nearly 10 times the displacement of Vextul's flagship, and mounted weapon systems that shouldn't have been possible on a mobile platform. Following it came a parade of vessels that represented 30 years of unrestricted military development, each one incorporating technologies that the Council had banned as too dangerous for civilized warfare. Admiral Cross appeared on the main screen, a weathered human in his 60s, whose eyes held the kind of calculation that came from commanding forces in regions where survival depended on being more dangerous than anything you might encounter. Behind him, the bridge of the Thunderchild hummed with activity that spoke of absolute readiness for combat. Admiral Vextul, Cross said with the patience of someone explaining reality to children, you're currently looking at approximately 1/10 of our defensive capabilities in this sector. The installations you're detecting throughout the nebula represent 18 years of continuous development and fortification. The vessels you're tracking constitute a single battle group from our deep space fleet. He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. I'm going to explain this once, because I respect the Krillian reputation for military competence. Humanity has been building an interstellar civilization outside Council oversight for 3 decades. We've established territorial claims throughout regions the galaxy considers empty, developed technologies the Council banned as impossible, and created military capabilities that exceed anything in your experience. The tactical displays supported his words with devastating clarity. What the Krillians had taken for a sparsely settled region was actually one of humanity's most heavily fortified sectors. Mining operations were revealed as defensive installations. Research stations showed the signatures of military shipyards. Civilian settlements displayed the infrastructure of major population centers. You have 45 minutes to withdraw, Cross concluded. After that, we'll consider your continued presence an act of war against the human species. Vexthul found himself in the impossible position of commanding the largest military force in Krillian history while being utterly outmatched by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. His intelligence reports suggested humans possessed perhaps 24 functional warships and limited defensive capabilities. The reality was a military presence that could have conquered the Krillian Empire without significant effort. The withdrawal was conducted with as much dignity as possible, but there was no hiding the fact that 800 Krillian vessels had fled from a human force that hadn't even activated all its defensive systems. The incident sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy as news spread that humanity possessed military capabilities that exceeded every intelligence estimate. More disturbing was the implication that the Arcturus Nebula was just one of many such installations. If humans had built a fortress of that magnitude in a region the galaxy considered worthless, what might they have accomplished in the hundreds of other systems they had quietly claimed? The answer came when humanity began releasing territorial maps that redefined the galaxy's understanding of interstellar geography. President Elena Vasquez stood before the United Earth Assembly in Geneva, addressing not just the representatives of Earth's nations, but the entire human diaspora, scattered throughout the galaxy. The assembly hall had been expanded to accommodate holographic attendees from hundreds of worlds, creating a virtual gathering that spanned dozens of star systems. Fellow humans, she began. For 30 years we have lived a careful lie. We have pretended to be a minor species with limited ambitions, constrained by council regulations and dependent on galactic goodwill for our survival. Today, that pretense ends. Behind her, a holographic display showed the true extent of human space for the first time. The revelation was staggering even to many humans who had participated in the expansion without understanding its full scope. Hundreds of systems showed human presence, connected by trade routes and communication networks that formed a civilization rivaling the Council itself. The galaxy expelled us believing they were casting out a troublesome upstart with perhaps a dozen colonies and limited resources, Vasquez continued. They failed to understand that humans don't simply accept limitations. We work around them, over them, and through them until they cease to exist. The display zoomed in on specific sectors, showing the true scale of human achievement. Agricultural worlds that could feed billions, industrial centers that outproduced entire council sectors, research installations that had advanced human technology decades beyond anything the galaxy had seen, military bases that could project force throughout known space. We didn't break council law, the president explained. We simply operated in the spaces between laws, in the systems they considered worthless, using methods they thought impossible. We built a civilization in the shadows while maintaining the fiction of compliance with restrictions that would have doomed us to permanent inferiority. The implications rippled through galactic politics like shockwaves from a supernova. Species that had voted for humanity's expulsion suddenly realized they had freed a potential superpower. Governments that had dismissed humans as a minor irritant found themselves facing a neighbor with resources and capabilities that exceeded their own. The Council's response was predictably fractured. Some members called for immediate diplomatic overtures to repair relations with humanity. Others demanded military action to contain what they saw as an existential threat to galactic stability. A few species quietly began reassessing their own territorial claims, wondering what other secrets might be hidden in the spaces they had dismissed as worthless. Ambassador Zefkara of the Velta Consortium found herself in the impossible position of trying to analyze a threat that redefined her understanding of galactic power dynamics. She had spent her career studying interspecies politics based on known capabilities and territorial holdings. Humanity's revelation that they possessed both in quantities that dwarfed official estimates made every previous calculation meaningless. Her aide, a young diplomat named Kesara, brought the latest intelligence reports with barely controlled panic. Ambassador, the territorial claims are confirmed. Human settlements in 437 systems, with populations totaling nearly 50 billion. Industrial capacity exceeding anything outside the core worlds. Military production capabilities that could outfit a fleet large enough to threaten entire sectors. Zefkara studied the reports with growing horror. Kesara, how is this possible? Our intelligence services have been monitoring human expansion for decades. How did they hide an entire civilization? The answer lay in humanity's fundamental difference from every other species in the galaxy. While other civilizations expanded along predictable lines, claiming the most valuable systems and developing them according to established patterns, Humans had deliberately chosen the worlds everyone else considered worthless. They had settled planets with hostile atmospheres, extreme weather, and dangerous radiation levels. They had built cities in asteroid belts, on moons with no air, and in systems where the local star would have killed most other species. They had turned worthless systems into valuable territory through sheer determination and technological innovation. More importantly, they had done it all while maintaining perfect diplomatic facades. Human ambassadors had attended council meetings while human fleets patrolled space the council didn't even know was claimed. Human representatives had accepted territorial restrictions while human colonies were established dozens of systems beyond those limits. The galaxy had expelled humanity believing they were removing a minor irritant from galactic politics. Instead, they had freed the largest hidden empire in galactic history, one that possessed the resources and capabilities to challenge the entire established order, and humanity was just getting started. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of her flagship, looking out at the fleet that represented 30 years of careful preparation and hidden development. Hundreds of vessels stretched into the distance, each one incorporating technologies that would revolutionize galactic understanding of what was possible in military engineering. Her tactical officer, Commander Torres, approached with the latest status reports. Admiral, all deep space fleets are now at full operational status. We have 43 battle groups deployed throughout human space, with reserve forces capable of tripling that number within 6 months. Chen nodded, studying displays that showed human forces throughout the galaxy revealing themselves for the first time. Commander, what's our current assessment of galactic military capabilities compared to our own? Torres consulted her analysis, the product of 3 decades of intelligence gathering and technological development. Admiral, based on current data, human military capabilities exceed the combined forces of any 3 council sectors. Our individual ship capabilities are approximately 2 generations ahead of anything in the galactic community. Our numbers are sufficient to project force throughout known space simultaneously. The Admiral smiled with satisfaction. The galaxy had spent 30 years believing humans were constrained by council regulations and dependent on galactic protection. They were about to learn that humanity had been building the most advanced military force in galactic history while pretending to be harmless neighbors. The revelation was just the beginning. Humanity had spent 3 decades preparing not just for independence but for dominance. The galaxy had expelled them, believing they were removing a problem. Instead, they had freed the solution to every challenge the galactic community would face in the coming decades, whether the galaxy wanted humanity's help or not. 6 months after the expulsion, the galaxy received its most terrifying lesson about humanity's true nature when the Void Hunters returned. The Void Hunters were a nightmare from the galaxy's distant past, an extragalactic species that had ravaged known space 3,000 years earlier before mysteriously vanishing beyond the galactic rim. They were creatures of pure malevolence, existing only to consume and destroy, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. Their technology was biological, their ships were living entities, and their hunger for destruction was absolute. When their scouts began appearing at the edge of council space, panic spread through the galactic community like wildfire. The species that had barely survived their last incursion were older, more advanced, and better prepared, but even the most optimistic projections suggested massive casualties and the potential collapse of entire sectors before the threat could be contained. The first attacks came without warning. 3 council border systems simply went dark, their communication networks severed, and their populations vanishing without a trace. When scout fleets arrived to investigate, they found worlds stripped of all life, their surfaces scarred by the kind of systematic consumption that characterized Void Hunter feeding patterns. Admiral Vexthal, recently promoted to Supreme Commander of Council Defense Forces after his encounter with humanity in the Arcturus Nebula, found himself facing a threat that made his previous challenges seem trivial. The War Council spoke of mobilizing every available vessel, of rallying the entire galaxy against an enemy that had once brought civilization to its knees. The debates grew heated as species argued over strategy, resource allocation, and command structure. Some wanted to establish defensive perimeters around the core worlds. Others advocated for forward deployment to meet the threat before it could gain momentum. All were united in their certainty that the coming war would test the galaxy's survival. That was when humanity made an offer that stunned the Council into silence. The message arrived through diplomatic channels that shouldn't have existed, transmitted from sources that appeared throughout Council space simultaneously. The communication was simple, direct, and utterly unexpected. Ambassador Maria Santos appeared on screens in government buildings, military headquarters, and council chambers across the galaxy, speaking with the calm authority of someone representing overwhelming force. To the species of the Galactic Council, she began, Humanity has observed the return of the extragalactic threat known as the Void Hunters. We are aware of the historical devastation this species has inflicted upon the galaxy, and we understand the fear their presence generates among civilized worlds. Behind her, holographic displays showed human fleets moving into position throughout space that officially didn't belong to them. The ships were larger and more heavily armed than anything the Council had seen, moving with the precision that spoke of absolute tactical superiority. Despite our recent expulsion from your organization, humanity recognizes that some threats transcend political differences. We therefore offer our assistance in containing this threat before it can establish a foothold in civilized space. The offer was met with incredulous silence throughout the galactic community. Humanity was volunteering to help defend the same species that had cast them out 6 months earlier. More importantly, they were claiming to possess the military capabilities necessary to make such an offer meaningful. Council Speaker Velnoth, still reeling from intelligence reports that revealed humanity's true territorial holdings, struggled to process the implications. Ambassador Santos, while the Council appreciates this gesture, we must ask what humanity expects to gain from such assistance. Santos smiled with the kind of patience that adults showed children asking obvious questions. Speaker Velnoth, humanity gains the security that comes from preventing an extragalactic threat from establishing permanent presence in our galaxy. We have no desire to share space with a species whose only purpose is consumption and destruction. The real shock came when humanity began deploying forces that revealed the true scale of their hidden military buildup. Fleets appeared throughout Council space without warning, taking positions that suggested they had been planning for this scenario for decades. The ships themselves represented technology that was at least 2 generations ahead of anything in Council databases, armed with weapons that operated on principles the galaxy's best scientists couldn't identify. Admiral Chen commanded the largest deployment, a task force of over 300 vessels that took position along the most likely approach routes for Void Hunter expansion. Her flagship, the UES Dominion, was a mobile fortress that massed more than some space stations, bristling with defensive systems and weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Her fleet deployed with the kind of precision that suggested extensive practice in operations the Council had never observed. Defensive formations appeared overnight in systems that had been empty the day before. Supply lines materialized to support operations on a scale that should have required months of preparation. Most disturbing of all, human forces demonstrated familiarity with Void Hunter technology that suggested they had been studying the threat far longer than their recent emergence would suggest. Commander Elena Rodriguez, tactical officer aboard the Dominion, studied sensor readings that painted a picture of approaching catastrophe. Admiral, we're detecting multiple Void Hunter fleets approaching through the outer rim. Initial estimates suggest over 2,000 biological vessels, with more appearing beyond sensor range. Chen nodded grimly. The Void Hunters were committing forces on a scale that exceeded historical precedent. Where their previous incursion had involved raiding fleets and scouting missions, this approach suggested they intended to establish permanent presence and begin systematic consumption of the galaxy. Commander, status of Council forces. Rodriguez consulted her displays, showing the scattered deployments of various Council species attempting to organize coherent defense. Disorganized at best, Admiral. The Krillian Empire has deployed their entire fleet, but they're spread across too many systems to provide effective resistance. The Veltar Consortium is falling back to defensive positions around their core worlds. Most other species are either evacuating threatened systems or requesting protection from larger powers. The Admiral studied the tactical situation with the detached analysis that had made her humanity's most successful military commander. The Council was facing the same problem that had plagued their response to the original Void Hunter incursion. Too many competing authorities, insufficient coordination, and fundamental disagreements about strategy. Commander, signal all human fleets. Implement Operation Cleansing Fire. All Void Hunter assets are designated as priority targets for immediate destruction. What followed was a demonstration of military capability that redefined galactic understanding of what human technology could accomplish. The first engagement came when a Void Hunter scouting fleet encountered the UES Prometheus, the same vessel that had destroyed Krexti raiders months earlier. The biological ships, each one a living nightmare capable of consuming entire planets, moved to investigate what they perceived as a minor threat. The Prometheus opened fire with weapons that violated every assumption about what was possible in mobile artillery. Particle beams that could pierce dimensional barriers tore through Void Hunter bioarmor like it was tissue paper. Quantum torpedoes collapsed local space-time around their targets, causing biological vessels to simply cease existing. Most terrifying of all, the ship deployed nanite swarms that consumed Void Hunter biomass faster than the creatures could regenerate. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, 37 Void Hunter vessels had been completely destroyed, their biological components converted into raw materials that the human ship's fabrication systems could process. The Prometheus emerged without a scratch, having demonstrated that humanity possessed weapons specifically designed to counter Void Hunter regenerative capabilities. Similar engagements erupted throughout the Outer Rim as human fleets encountered Void Hunter forces attempting to establish beachheads in civilized space. In every case, the result was complete annihilation of the biological attackers. Human vessels demonstrated tactical advantages that suggested decades of study and preparation specifically for this threat. The revelation sent shockwaves through both the galactic community and the Void Hunter collective consciousness. The biological entities had expected to face the same level of resistance they had encountered millennia earlier, brave but ultimately futile efforts by species using conventional weapons and tactics. Instead, they encountered an enemy that seemed specifically engineered to counter their every advantage. Dr. Marcus Webb, director of the Titan Research Station, watched the battle reports from his laboratory orbiting a neutron star in the Outer Rim. The facility had been studying Void Hunter technology for 25 years, ever since humanity's deep space scouts had encountered dormant biological constructs drifting between galaxies. His research had revealed the fundamental truth that the Council was only now beginning to understand. The Void Hunters weren't random destroyers. They were a biological weapon system created by an extinct civilization for the purpose of galactic sterilization. Their technology was based on consumption and conversion, turning everything they encountered into more of themselves. Humanity had been preparing to face them for over 2 decades. Dr. Webb, his assistant, called from across the laboratory. We're receiving confirmation from multiple battlefronts. Human anti-biological weapons are performing as designed. Conversion rates are approaching 97% efficiency. Webb nodded with grim satisfaction. The weapons humanity was deploying against the Void Hunters weren't conventional military hardware. They were specialized systems developed specifically to counter biological technology, designed to not just destroy the creatures but prevent them from adapting to resistance. Nanite swarms that could disassemble biological matter at the molecular level. Energy weapons that disrupted the quantum fields that held biological constructs together. Viral programs that could infect and corrupt the collective consciousness that coordinated Void Hunter actions. Most importantly, humanity had developed the capability to turn Void Hunter biomass into resources for their own military production. The tide of battle turned within weeks. Void Hunter fleets that had entered galactic space expecting to begin systematic consumption found themselves being systematically consumed instead. Human vessels harvested biological ships like farmers reaping grain, converting enemy forces into raw materials that could be processed into additional human military assets. The biological collective that controlled the Void Hunters experienced something it hadn't encountered in millions of years of expansion: genuine fear. The creatures that existed only to consume and destroy were being consumed and destroyed by an enemy that seemed to understand their nature better than they understood themselves. Council forces watched in amazement as humanity demonstrated capabilities that exceeded their wildest speculation. Human fleets operated with precision that suggested they had been planning for this war longer than most Council species had been spacefaring. Their weapons were specifically designed to counter biological technology. Their tactics focused on preventing adaptation and regeneration rather than simple destruction. Most disturbing of all, humanity was winning with an ease that suggested they were holding back significant capabilities. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Dominion, watching tactical displays that showed Void Hunter forces in full retreat throughout the Outer Rim. The biological ships were fleeing galactic space, their collective consciousness apparently deciding that this particular galaxy contained prey too dangerous to consume. Status report: Commander Rodriguez. Her tactical officer consulted multiple displays showing the scope of the route. Admiral, all major Void Hunter concentrations have been eliminated or driven beyond sensor range. We're detecting scattered biological constructs fleeing toward the galactic rim. Our pursuit forces are maintaining contact and ensuring they don't establish fallback positions. Chen studied the strategic situation with satisfaction. The threat that had terrified the galaxy for months had been eliminated in less than 6 weeks of sustained human military action. More importantly, the operation had demonstrated humanity's true military capabilities to every species in the galaxy. Losses? Minimal, Admiral. We lost 3 patrol vessels to biological weapon systems before we could deploy countermeasures. Total casualties are under 200 personnel across all fleets. The numbers spoke volumes about the gap between human military capabilities and anything else in the galaxy. Humanity had faced down an extragalactic threat that had once brought civilization to its knees, and they had done it with losses that wouldn't qualify as a significant engagement by most military standards. The aftermath was even more telling. Human fleets began returning to their previous positions, but not before leaving behind defensive installations that would monitor the galactic rim for any sign of Void Hunter return. The constructions appeared overnight, massive platforms that could support populations in the thousands while maintaining sensor networks capable of monitoring intergalactic space. The galaxy slowly began to understand that humanity hadn't just defeated the Void Hunters. They had established permanent presence in regions of space that no other species could effectively monitor or defend. They had turned a galactic crisis into an opportunity to extend their influence into territories that everyone else considered impossibly remote. President Elena Vasquez addressed the galaxy from the Oval Office, speaking to an audience that now understood they were listening to the leader of the most powerful military force in known space. Her words carried the weight of recent demonstration, backed by capabilities that exceeded every previous assumption about what human technology could accomplish. To the species of the galaxy, she began, humanity has demonstrated our commitment to galactic security by eliminating the Void Hunter threat. This action was taken not for political advantage or territorial gain, but because some threats transcend the boundaries between civilizations. Behind her, displays showed human forces returning to their territories, but also the new installations that now monitored approaches to the galaxy that had never been defended before. The message was clear. Humanity was now the galaxy's first and strongest line of defense against external threats. However, Vasquez continued, her voice taking on an edge that promised consequences. This demonstration of our capabilities should not be misunderstood. Humanity has shown restraint in exercising our full military potential. We have chosen cooperation over conquest, assistance over domination. That choice remains in effect as long as the galaxy respects human territorial sovereignty and treats our species with appropriate consideration. The implications were clear to every intelligence analyst in the galaxy. Humanity possessed the capability to conquer any species they chose, possibly all of them simultaneously. They were choosing not to exercise that capability, but the choice remained theirs to make. The galaxy had expelled humanity, believing they were removing a minor irritant from galactic politics. Instead, they had freed the most powerful military force in known space, one that now served as protector against threats the galaxy couldn't face alone. Whether that protection would remain freely given depended entirely on how the galaxy chose to treat their new protectors. 1 year after the expulsion, the galaxy faced a truth that fundamentally altered the balance of power among the stars. Humanity hadn't just survived their banishment from the Galactic Council. They had emerged as the dominant force in known space. The revelation came not through conquest or intimidation, but through simple, undeniable mathematics. Ambassador Zethkara sat in her office aboard the Council station, staring at intelligence reports that painted a picture she still struggled to accept. The documents spread across her desk told the story of humanity's true capabilities. Compiled from a year of careful observation and increasingly desperate intelligence gathering. The numbers were staggering. Human territory now encompassed over 600 star systems, with colonies supporting a total population approaching 60 billion people. Their industrial capacity exceeded the combined output of the 3 largest council sectors. Most disturbing of all, their military forces had grown to a size that could challenge the entire galactic community simultaneously. Her aide, Kesara, entered with the latest reports from the intelligence division. The young diplomat's expression carried the kind of shell shock that came from processing information that redefined one's understanding of reality. "Ambassador," Kesara began hesitantly, "the analysis of human expansion patterns is complete." "The projections are concerning." Zethkara gestured for her aide to continue, though she suspected she already knew what the reports would reveal. Humanity's growth had been exponential rather than linear, suggesting capabilities that exceeded anything in the galactic community's experience. At current rates of expansion, human territory will encompass over 1,000 star systems within 5 years. Their population growth suggests they could reach 100 billion citizens within a decade. Most troubling, their military production capabilities are expanding faster than their territorial claims. The ambassador studied the projections with growing alarm. "Kesara, these numbers suggest humanity is building towards something larger than simple expansion. This level of military production implies preparation for galactic-scale operations." That was the truth that terrified the galaxy's power brokers. Humanity wasn't just growing. They were preparing for something that would require capabilities exceeding anything in known history. The question was whether that preparation was defensive or offensive in nature. The answer came when humanity announced the Great Reformation. President Elena Vasquez stood before the assembled leaders of human space in the grand chamber of the new capital on Proxima Terra, a world that had been transformed from a barren rock into a garden paradise through technologies that defied council understanding of what was possible. The gathering represented the largest political assembly in human history, with delegates attending from every settled system in human space. "Fellow humans," she began, her words carried to every corner of human civilization, through quantum communication networks that operated beyond the galaxy's existing infrastructure. For over 3 centuries, our species has reached toward the stars with hope, determination, and the unshakable belief that humanity's future lies among the galaxies. Today, we take the next step in that journey. Behind her, holographic displays showed the scope of human achievement since their expulsion from the Council. Hundreds of worlds terraformed and settled, thousands of installations constructed in regions the galaxy had never explored, industrial capabilities that exceeded anything in known space, military forces that could reshape the political landscape of the entire galaxy. "The Great Reformation begins today," Vasquez announced, her voice carrying the weight of history in the making. "Humanity will no longer simply expand among the stars, we will improve them. We will take the empty, hostile, and worthless regions of space and transform them into gardens of life and civilization." The scale of the project was breathtaking. Humanity planned to systematically terraform and settle every habitable or potentially habitable world within 500 light-years of Earth. More ambitiously, they intended to create habitable worlds where none existed, using technologies that could reshape solar systems to support human life. The announcement sent shockwaves throughout the galactic community. The project humanity was describing would require resources and capabilities that exceeded the combined capacity of every known civilization. More troubling, it would give them control over regions of space that other species hadn't even explored yet. Dr. Sarah Kim, now director of the Galactic Engineering Consortium, watched the reaction feeds from across known space as the galaxy processed the implications of humanity's announcement. The consortium itself represented capabilities that redefined what was possible in large-scale engineering, combining human innovation with resources from across their expanded territory. Dr. Kim, her assistant, reported from the Project Management Center. "We're receiving queries from over 200 species requesting information about our terraforming technologies. The Crystalline Assembly is asking about our stellar engineering capabilities. The Andromedan Collective wants to know if our proposals are actually achievable." Kim smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose life's work had finally been recognized. "Tell them that humanity doesn't announce projects we can't complete. The Great Reformation will proceed as outlined, with or without galactic participation." That was the key difference between humanity and every other species in the galaxy. Where others saw obstacles and limitations, humans saw problems to be solved through innovation and determination. The technologies needed for the Great Reformation had been under development for decades, hidden within research stations that operated outside council oversight. Stellar engineering platforms capable of repositioning planets, atmospheric processes that could transform any world into a garden, gravity manipulators that could adjust planetary conditions to human preferences, temporal acceleration fields that could compress centuries of natural development into decades of directed change. Most ambitiously, humanity had developed the capability to construct artificial worlds in regions where natural planets didn't exist. The first demonstration came in the Kepler 442 system, a region that contained a single gas giant and extensive asteroid fields, but no terrestrial planets capable of supporting life. Human engineering fleets arrived and began construction of what they termed a planetary assembly project. Using technologies that operated beyond anything in Council databases, they began gathering asteroid material and restructuring it into a planetary core. Gravity manipulators compressed the material while fusion reactors provided the energy needed to create a stable planetary body. Atmospheric processes began creating breathable air while orbital platforms regulated temperature and weather patterns. The process took 18 months. When it was complete, humanity had created a world larger than Earth, with perfect conditions for human habitation and room for a population of over 5 billion people. The planetary engineering project represented capabilities that exceeded the combined technological achievement of every species in the galactic community. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity began replicating the process throughout their territory. Empty systems were transformed into thriving centers of civilization. Hostile worlds became garden paradises. Regions that had been considered utterly worthless became the foundation for an empire that dwarfed anything in galactic history. Admiral Chen commanded the expanded human fleet from her new flagship, the UES Genesis, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. At 15 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack planets, it was less a ship than a mobile battle station capable of projecting force across multiple star systems simultaneously. Her fleet had grown to encompass over 5,000 vessels, ranging from exploration scouts to the massive world ship carriers that could transport entire populations between star systems. The expansion had been fueled by industrial capabilities that seemed to improve exponentially rather than linearly, suggesting that humanity had achieved some form of technological breakthrough that accelerated their entire development process. "Status report, Commander Torres," she requested, studying displays that showed human forces throughout the galaxy. Her executive officer consulted multiple tactical screens showing the scope of human military deployment. "Admiral, we now have permanent presence in over 800 star systems. Fleet strength has increased to 5,300 combat vessels, with another 2,000 in various stages of construction. Our defensive installations cover approximately 30% of the galactic rim." Chen nodded, studying the strategic situation that had evolved over the past year. "What about external threats?" "Minimal, Admiral. The Void Hunter monitoring stations report no signs of renewed incursion. Several minor species have attempted to probe our borders, but they've been discouraged without requiring military action. Most significantly, Council intelligence operations have decreased by approximately 60% in the past 6 months." The Admiral smiled with satisfaction. The galaxy was learning to treat humanity with the respect that came from recognizing superior capabilities. The various probe missions and intelligence operations that had characterized the first months after expulsion had gradually ceased as species realized that humanity possessed both the ability to detect such activities and the military strength to respond decisively. More importantly, humanity's response to the Void Hunter incursion had established them as the galaxy's primary defense against external threats. Other species might resent human expansion, but they couldn't deny that human military capabilities provided security that the Council had never been able to guarantee. The political implications rippled throughout galactic civilization as species began reassessing their relationships with both humanity and the Council. Several governments quietly opened diplomatic channels with human authorities, seeking trade agreements and mutual defense pacts that would provide access to human technology and protection. The Council itself faced an existential crisis as member species began questioning the value of belonging to an organization that had expelled their most powerful potential ally. The debates in Council chambers grew increasingly heated as different factions argued over how to respond to humanity's emergence as a galactic superpower. Some advocated for immediate overtures to restore diplomatic relations. Others demanded military action to contain human expansion before it challenged Council authority throughout the galaxy. A few species quietly began considering whether their interests might be better served by leaving the Council and establishing independent relationships with humanity. The crisis deepened when humanity began offering alternative arrangements to species that had grown dissatisfied with Council policies. The Terran Commonwealth emerged as humanity's answer to the Galactic Council, a voluntary association that offered member species access to human technology, military protection, and terraforming expertise in exchange for mutual cooperation and resource sharing. Unlike the Council's complex bureaucracy and restrictive regulations, the Commonwealth operated on principles of mutual benefit and voluntary participation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within months, over 50 species had requested membership in the Commonwealth, attracted by offers of technological advancement and protection that the Council couldn't match. More troubling for Council leadership, several of these were established Council members who chose to maintain dual citizenship or abandon their Council membership entirely. President Vasquez presided over the Commonwealth's founding ceremony from the Grand Assembly Hall on New Geneva, a world that had been specifically designed and constructed to serve as the Commonwealth's capital. The facility itself demonstrated human capabilities, with architecture that accommodated the environmental needs of dozens of different species while maintaining aesthetic beauty that impressed representatives from across the galaxy. "To our new partners," she addressed the assembled delegates, "the Terran Commonwealth represents humanity's commitment to cooperative advancement rather than competitive domination. We offer our technologies, our protection, and our expertise to species that share our vision of galactic improvement through mutual cooperation." The contrast with Council policies was deliberate and stark. Where the Council imposed restrictions and limitations designed to maintain existing power structures, the Commonwealth offered advancement and growth that could transforming entire civilizations. Human terraforming technology could make any species independent of resource limitations. Human military protection could eliminate the threats that had plagued smaller species for millennia. Most importantly, humanity offered partnership rather than membership, allowing species to maintain their independence while benefiting from cooperative arrangements. The final transformation came when humanity revealed the true scope of their long-term planning. Marcus Webb, now director of the Galactic Research Consortium, announced the discovery that would reshape galactic civilizations' understanding of their place in the universe. Speaking from the newly constructed Deep Space Observatory orbiting beyond the galactic rim, he revealed findings that had been 30 years in the making. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored representatives of various species," he began, addressing an audience that spanned the known galaxy. "Humanity's deep space exploration programs have made discoveries that fundamentally alter our understanding of galactic history and our future challenges." Behind him, displays showed images captured by sensors that operated beyond anything in Council technology. The pictures revealed structures and installations throughout intergalactic space that could only be artificial in origin. More disturbing, they showed signs of ongoing activity that suggested whatever had built them was still operational. "The galaxy is not alone," Webb announced with the gravity of someone delivering news that would reshape civilization. "We have detected multiple artificial constructs throughout intergalactic space, some of them larger than entire solar systems. More significantly, we have evidence that these constructs are expanding, suggesting active civilizations with capabilities that exceed anything in our local galaxy." The revelation sent shockwaves throughout known space. The galaxy had always assumed they represented the highest form of civilization in the local region. The discovery that they were being observed and potentially evaluated by entities with vastly superior capabilities changed everything. Webb continued with information that explained decades of human behavior. "Humanity has been aware of these entities for 25 years, since our deep space exploration first detected their presence. Every expansion, every technological development, every military preparation has been conducted with the understanding that we might eventually need to defend our galaxy against threats that make the Void Hunters seem primitive by comparison." The truth finally emerged. Humanity's secret expansion, their hidden technological development, their mysterious military capabilities, all of it had been preparation for challenges that the galaxy couldn't even imagine. While other species argued over territorial boundaries and trade agreements, humans had been preparing for the possibility of defending the entire galaxy against extragalactic civilizations with godlike capabilities. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Genesis, studying sensor readings that showed human defensive installations throughout the galactic rim. The network represented 30 years of planning and construction, creating a defensive perimeter around the galaxy that could monitor and potentially intercept threats from any direction. "Admiral," Commander Torres reported, "the deep space monitoring stations are reporting increased activity beyond the galactic rim. Whatever's out there, it's showing more interest in our galaxy than in previous decades." Chen nodded grimly. The extragalactic entities had remained passive observers for millennia, content to watch the galaxy's development from a distance. Recent changes in their behavior suggested that something had caught their attention, possibly humanity's rapid expansion and technological advancement. "Signal all fleets, Commander. Implement Protocol Omega. If the galaxy is about to receive visitors, I want them to understand that humanity is ready to provide appropriate hospitality." The protocol activated defensive systems throughout human space that exceeded anything the galaxy had previously imagined. Weapons platforms that could sterilize solar systems. Defensive barriers that could protect entire sectors from attack. Most ominously, construction facilities that could convert the galaxy's entire industrial capacity to military production within months. President Vasquez addressed the galaxy one final time from Earth, speaking to an audience that finally understood the true scope of humanity's vision and capabilities. Behind her, displays showed the defensive network that now protected known space, manned by human forces that had grown from a single species to guardians of galactic civilization. "To all species of our galaxy," she began, "humanity has always believed that our greatest achievements come through cooperation, determination, and the willingness to face challenges that seem impossible. Today, we face the possibility that our galaxy may need to defend itself against entities whose capabilities exceed our imagination." She paused, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle. Throughout the galaxy, representatives of hundreds of species listened to words that might determine the survival of their civilizations. "Humanity stands ready to defend our galaxy against any threat, regardless of its source or magnitude. We invite all species to join us in this endeavor. contributing whatever capabilities they possess to our common defense. Together, we can face whatever challenges await us among the stars. The galaxy that had expelled humanity as a troublesome upstart found themselves dependent on human protection against threats they couldn't comprehend. The species that had voted to cast out their most powerful potential ally now looked to that same species for salvation against challenges that could mean the extinction of all galactic civilization. Humanity had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, building the capabilities needed to defend not just their own species, but every form of life in the galaxy. Whether the galaxy chose to accept that protection with gratitude or resentment,